You can legally pay a fine to not serve. There are some countries where religious exemptions or spiritual exemptions you can not serve. In some cases, you don't have to go to the front line. So had a guy who worked here, and he served in the Austrian army, and they would march around Vienna. If you go to Vienna, sometimes you see they're just out there guarding things. In many cases, it's boys. I think that like Norway and Sweden and Israel, it is both men and women have to serve. But in many cases, let's say you're getting citizenship and you've got daughters, that may not be an issue. There's other cases where conscription is from a certain age, let's say 18 to 26, and if you're not there, they don't put you into the system. There's some cases where dual citizenship can help, but those are relatively rare. So there's a number of ways to potentially avoid that. But mandatory military service is one thing to look at. For some people, it's, hey, I just don't believe in that. I don't want to be a citizen of a country that does that. But if you're looking at the more practical consideration of do you need to go in, generally speaking, like a country like Turkey, where they have a citizenship by investment program, does not want its investor citizens to go in. Now, in some of those cases, even if you're exempt, your children who just got it passed down from you, they may not be exempt. So you want to look at those implications. And in some cases, you may say, hey, I'm going to get a second citizenship. For me, that helps me diversify my passport portfolio, but I'm not going to apply on behalf of my children, for example, because of an issue like this. And so potentially you can get a citizenship now, and your children can get it at some point in the future once that conscription requirement goes away. But there are some European citizenships you can get by descent that you might want to get after a certain age because of this issue. The fourth thing you would want to look at when applying or when looking at second citizenships is any kind of sanctions or any kind of reputational issues. So Iran, Syria, if there's any North Koreans watching, those are a problem. We've had a few people we've worked with who were Cuban Americans. You don't want to go claim your Cuban citizenship to the extent it's even possible. Russia now obviously is largely problematic. We're looking at like Lithuania's coming out and saying, hey, maybe we're going to be more flexible on dual citizenship, but only with these countries. There's going to be a nice list, NATO and the EU and all that. There's going to be a naughty list. The CIS countries in Eastern Europe and in Central Asia, various countries that have affiliations with Russia, they're going to be on a naughty list. There are banks that reject all kinds of different people. I mean, there's some of these offshore banks that, if you're from the Balkans, if you're from Central Asia, if you're from the Caucasus, if you're from, Africa, if you're from, South America, if you're from almost anywhere, if you're from the U.S., we don't want you. I mean, we're not talking about that. But certainly, somebody who has a Kazakhstan citizenship, I mean, you might be asked some questions in limited circumstances, but the bigger ones are going to be the countries that just kind of have pariah status. You don't want to do that. And I told you, I knew a woman who had lived in Malaysia, married a guy who was an Iranian guy, and moved back to Iran, and she was able to immediately get Iranian citizenship, and did. And I think that is not the smartest thing. Now, if you're Russian Iranian, I guess you're living in a certain part of the world at this point. I generally wouldn't do that. You're seeing, the Caribbean citizenship countries now are going to be restricted to not accepting Russians, Belarusians, and basically all have gone back on accepting Iranians. And so if you can claim some country that could be looked at in unfavorable terms by a bank or a future citizenship or a future residence, then you might want to think twice about doing that. That's not going to apply to most of them, and I doubt most people here qualify for Iranian citizenship. The last thing to look at is how it will impact a job or security clearance. We've had folks who've had security clearances who they just don't get dual citizenship, and in some cases they just avoid certain residence permits or permanent residence permits as well. So if you work for a certain government, obviously you don't want to go out and get a citizenship from a country that's anything other than favorable. And so, we've seen people who were, they were dual U.S. Canadian, and sometimes that was okay. But certainly you got a lot less flexibility when you are in those spaces, and sometimes you can't have dual citizenship at all. So, as much as that sounds like, there's a lot of issues potentially there, if you look at any kind of citizenship or residence by investment, Caribbean citizenships, for example, they're not going to tax you no matter where you live. If you want to give it up, great. What do we care? There's no military service. It's not much of a military in some of these countries. And so, those are designed for folks who want freedom and flexibility. Now, I believe that having triple citizenship is going to be the ultimate way to have freedom, even building a bigger passport portfolio. For the average person, having triple citizenship is a way to ensure your freedom. So you're going to be looking at some other countries, even if you're outside, let's say, the Caribbean, even if you're outside of a place where you can get a residence in a small country. You want to look at what is the future? Are these countries going to tax me? I don't think that most countries are going to try and tax you just by not living there. I mean, take a country like many countries in Eastern Europe, for example, or Ireland, or even parts of South America, where there's kind of a history of emigration. I don't think it's going to go down well to say if you don't leave the country, you're going to still pay tax. It works in a country like the U.S. where most people don't leave. People think it's the best country on earth. Why would you go anywhere else? And so it kind of works politically speaking. So you have to kind of read those tea leaves. Do I think more countries are going to prohibit renunciation? In a de facto way, occasionally, such as the U.S. did during COVID, but generally speaking, I don't see that as a big issue. Military service, again, probably one of the bigger issues to look at, and obviously just be smart about not getting random, passports. Sometimes the juice is not worth the squeeze, as they say. We had someone who qualified for Vietnamese citizenship by descent. It was just like, is that really going to solve any of my problems? Maybe it could. It can eliminate you. Got visa-free travel throughout the entire Indian region. But in this situation, it's like, I don't really want that. Maybe some people are going to think Vietnam is weird. Even though it's in my blood, I just don't want to bother with it. I'd rather go out and pay for a passport from a country that people will understand a bit more, that doesn't maybe carry any, weird baggage. I mean, people still look at the Vietnam War.